Well, hello and good evening. Thank you all for being here tonight, and thank you for not climbing over the barriers and sitting up in the back row. We appreciate you all sitting down here in front. So thanks for being here. My name is Bob Rocha. I'm the Associate Curator of Science and Research here. And quite often I get to work on really cool projects with really cool, smart, and interesting people, and this was certainly one of those great opportunities. I will introduce them to you in a moment, and then in about 8 minutes from now, I will introduce them in greater detail. But I definitely have to acknowledge a couple of other sponsors and partners, primarily the David P. Wheatland Foundation, who underwrote most of this, and have also provided us with the resources and the ability to take this on the road. So it will be going to several other places, and with it will be a traveling resource kit, and I hope you will take a look at that, basically in the gallery and down the stairs. So when you go out, when we're done here, and go get yourself a snack or a beer or a wine, you'll also be able to see the things that will go on the road with our 12 panels. And if you haven't seen those 12 panels yet, when we're done here, you'll have the opportunity to go upstairs into our Kerner Gallery, which is also known as the Sperm Whale Gallery, because that's where the sperm whale skeleton is, and you can see those panels there. And we also need to thank the Naval Undersea Warfare Center from Newport, and I know Jeffrey Prater is here to represent them. The museum's had an educational partnership agreement with the U.S. Navy now for, I think this is our 7th year into it. This is the second of a 5-year partnerships. And his colleague, Kerry Spiro, did some great graphic layout work, and it's that final work that was then fabricated by Navy folks, and then that's what's on display now. So it's great to have that kind of a partnership where we can all help each other learn about some really interesting animals, but also get to learn about each other's work too, and I think that's really, really cool. I'm going to be a pain and ask those of you, if your phones aren't already turned down, to turn those down. And yes, I've already turned mine down. So very quickly, I will tell you who the four partners and creators of this are, and then we're going to have a little 6-minute video that is the result of a Zoom chat we had, 5 days ago, and then Ren Bettencourt went crazy editing, and with help from Liz and Andrea. And then at some point we're going to weave in some other remarks from Elizabeth, but we're going to start with that, and I'll give you a good sense of the process and the why, and then we're going to have a chance to hear from all 4 of them. So briefly, I'm just going to go left to right because that's how you're seated. We have Ren Bettencourt, Dr. Andrea Bogomolni, Liz Bradfield, and Elizabeth James-Perry, and so let's say hello and thank you, and I will go into a little more detail later as to their background and their bona fides, I guess might be a good way to put it. I mean, and that could take up a good 20 minutes, but we're going to keep it a little briefer than that. So I will do a quick intro. I have a couple of questions to get us started that I'll make the microphone available to any of you that have questions for any of them. So right in front of me is Elizabeth Bradfield, and Liz is an associate professor of the practice of English and the co-director of the creative writing program at Brandeis University. I think you're still a whale watch naturalist for the dolphin fleet, too. Awesome. And next to Liz is Ren Bettencourt, and she's founder of All Creatures Productions. She's the one who put that video together, and when you head out to the gallery, you'll notice 4 stop-motion animations made from paper characters and other paper things. Ren made those as well. And when you're at the exhibit, if you go to one of the QR codes, you can press the QR code reader and you get to see one of those. And then next to Ren is Dr. Andrea Bogomolni, the other Dr. Dre, chair and co-founder of the Northwest Atlantic Seal Research Consortium. Her doctorate is in pathobiology and veterinary science with a certificate in public health from UConn. She was a postdoc at Hui as well. And to her left is Elizabeth James-Perry, Aquinnah Wampanoag artist, historian, marine scientist, and exhibit consultant. She's also a 2023 National Endowment for the Arts Heritage Award recipient. So let's welcome all of them. And I will get us started with the first question, and these two are going to be similar. Actually, before I keep talking, is there anything any of you wanted to say right off the bat before we get to the questions? Because I should offer you that opportunity.
Thank you all for being here.
Okay. So, what will viewers see in this exhibit that they wouldn't see in an exhibit that was focused solely on seal biology?
I can take this if you'd like. I'm Elizabeth James-Perry. Wanikisak, everybody, welcome. I think one of the nice things of this exhibit is that it's a combination of perspectives from, scientific research and observation to other more ancient traditional knowledge sources from different indigenous cultural perspectives. We've incorporated a little bit of art inspired by seals and marine mammal art, as well as a little bit of Wampanoag language in the text as well. So I think it's nice to have a combination. It bring a lot of different disciplines together and reflect a lot of different perspectives. It's more welcoming and comprehensive, I think.
And would you pronounce the word that is in that call out on the panel?
Yeah. So the word that I included was ongkik. In Wampanoag, it refers to being fat. So it's a description, it's sort of a descriptive word for the seal. That's sort of a generic seal. And then there are others as well, but I'm not the specialist you'd want to ask for those words. I'd have to go and practice for good pronunciation, so I'm not going to offer that today.
Anybody else want to add to that one? I know we talked about it a little bit in the video, but if there's anything you think wasn't still in the video.
I just don't know where to start because I'm just going to start talking and I'm just going to keep going. I think it was so important for it not to be about seal biology. I think that's the kind of funny part of not taking for granted things we do know already. I don't want to put it that way, but there's so much we don't know. Even all of us coming into the exhibit, doing our homework, doing our research, and opening up the rabbit holes of potentials and knowledge and what to share, and narrowing that down to things that are not seal biology. I mean, there's so much. But I think, just as you were saying, Elizabeth, like really interweaving different perspectives and stories is so important. And really what I hope when you see the panels you take from it, it's not just about a seal. You'll see everything's interwoven. It shouldn't be separate. So I'm hoping that that's part of that takeaway too.
I think something that maybe is not quite as obvious on the panels themselves, but maybe it is, it's just the amazing generosity of so many people doing work in so many fields who stepped forward, offered images, offered information, offered advice. The generosity of spirit behind this exhibit that allowed it to come into being. Thank you to all of you in this room. Most of you in this room were contributors to this exhibit in some way, shape, or form, and that I think is really important to acknowledge. It's a big community and it's a generous community, and there's a lot of people who are excited to have this story told and to get out to a wider audience and have been super helpful.
And that's a great segue to a little note that I just made about the thank you panel that's just outside the door, something that Andrea put together after the original 12 panels were done to list out all the people that donated something, including time, to this exhibition. So please, as you leave, take a moment to have a look at that. Okay, similar question, but in this case, what will viewers see in this exhibit that they would see in an exhibit that's focused solely on seal biology? Or is it just obvious? You're going to learn about harbor seals, gray seals, the babies.
No, it is a good question to add, because one of the really fundamental things that people think are so obvious, all of us are still trying to figure out. There's something I absolutely love, and I give Carrie credit for this too, which is the Meet the Seals panel. I think we have I think it's on that one. Just like the molting stage cycles, when they breed, when they're not eating, something so simple like that is a story that isn't told. And part of the rationale for having the exhibit in the first place was countering misinformation, which is based out of just not knowing. So just knowing that seals don't eat when they're molting, or they really need to eat before they have a baby. Those cycles are listed, and it's such an important part of the biology that you'll see in the panels. And I think in a format, in a figure, to be scientific about it, that's really easy to understand, and that science communication piece of biology, and that I really just so appreciate so much.
And the other thing I'll add, along with the 12 panels, there are 3 floor mats, gray seal male, female, and then a harbor seal. I mean, they look like deflated seals, but you'll at least get a 2-dimensional sense of how big they are, or in the case of the harbor seal, maybe how small it is. Anybody else want to add to this? Or?
Well, I'll just add that I think, and as well as looking at the seals, we did expand it then to the ecosystem as well, and thinking about the seals' role in the ecosystem and some of the important roles that they play there that there's one called surprising connections, so things that you might not have thought about in ways that seals influence the environment, and then expanded that out to society with humans and how we are influencing the animals and the environment as well.
Oh, I have to add one more. How could I forget? Ren's video on molting. I mean,
And putrients.
and
Putrients, which Liz coins that term, which is brilliant.
And if you want to learn more about putrients, you can watch one of Ren's animations. Yeah, there's a whale parallel to that called the whale pump. And it's just about the way animals are moving up and down in the water column, moving nutrients around, very important for phytoplankton and food chains. Okay, my next question is, what aspect of seals gets you excited to talk about them?
Where do I start?
Exactly.
Everything. And for me, a lot of it is that we are witnessing in the return of gray seals to this ecosystem something really remarkable, something that's exciting, something that's unfolding before our eyes. The ways that we're relating to these animals are changing. We're living in a time where so many of our stories are about loss. There used to be so much of this, there used to be so much of that. Where did this go? Where did that go? And here come these seals returning to the ecosystem, and it's thrilling. So all the ways that is unsettling, the ways that people react with enthusiasm, with surprise, the shifts that it's forcing fishers to make in their practices at sea, the whole complexity of that story to me is so exciting. So pick a thread, you're going to pull on it, and everything else will be touched.
Yeah, and it's just so cool that they're an animal that we can see. It still seems kind of exotic. You know, you might not have been used to seeing them, as you said, years ago, but now you can go out on the Cape and in Chatham, and you're very likely to see them and be able to really witness just their behavior and watch them. And it's just really cool that they are very accessible in some ways to us, and in some ways we need to learn to stay back a little bit. But it's cool to see a wildlife that I know you see them on whales, but you may or may not see a whale on a whale watch, right? Like, you're definitely going to see the seals if you go out. So it's just cool that they're here with us and pretty tolerant of us too, I think, which is neat.
And not only do we see them, we can smell them too.
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's kind of a blessing to see them come back from a tribal perspective. I think it has started a lot of really good conversations at home on our connection to marine life, because there's been such an alteration over hundreds of years in terms of abundance and presence and things like that. I think also from a tribal perspective, seeing the sort of the circle of life, so the seals and the sharks, understanding those connections, thinking about the connections with other beings as well, tribal traditions, cuisine that we're no longer practicing, in terms of some of the sea life that we would have been hunting and partaking of on a regular basis. Some communities, you know, in other parts of the country, still harvest seals and things for nutritional value and all. and still use parts of the seal. It's more rare for us. You know, we have, I think, educational permits in our tribe to use some of these things for really special occasions, so they're really well thought of, but it's not a common thing, and it's not taken for granted at all. It's quite unique and really special, and something we value. So.
Yeah, I had to think about this one. Thank you for that too. Because everything, I have this problem, everything excites me. I want to do everything and study it all. But I know this sounds kind of counterintuitive, but I'm excited about the conflicts, those points that brought me to really think about doing this exhibit of where does that come from? Is it actually conflict, or is it just not having an understanding or knowledge base to start from? And being able to provide just even a little piece of that gives me such joy and excitement, because it creates those further conversations that in my life have opened up so many wonderful doors and relationships and connections to people that I otherwise would not have, just to take the time for myself to figure out what to share and what to be excited about, and maybe take deep breaths about as well. But it's all opened up such amazing conversations, and I'm so grateful for that.
I was wondering if anybody out there has a question they'd like to ask.
Hello, I'm Jamal, and my question is, within the exhibit, will you be exploring how seals interact with invasive species, again, like the green crab? I mean, I know they're all over the place, and I do know some seal species will eat crabs. It's a pretty interesting thought, you know. Do the seals, in fact, pick off the green crab?
According to the science on seal diet that I'm aware of, and I am not a seal diet specialist, although we have some in the room, but I don't believe that green crab has showed up in the diet studies that have been done either from hard parts or from prey DNA.
We are so lucky because we have some people, if we decide to put on the spot, might answer, but we won't put them on the spot unless they want
But I
to.
love your question though, and we didn't look specifically on seals and invasive species, and that's a great question to pursue.
In the little food chain activity we made for the resource kit, I did include a Jonah crab, but it did not include a green crab.
Well, first of all, congratulations on launching this exhibit. I know it's been a long time coming. The video touched on the economic aspect of the seal and society issue and how challenging it is. You know, a lot of the progress happens in multiple discussions and meetings and, small groups over time. I work in the stranding response field and oftentimes only get 30 seconds to interact with someone. I can give them the biological, the main facts why they should want to protect these animals. But with the society component in mind, the history in the area, what is your elevator pitch to someone you interact with on the beach? You have 30 seconds to convince someone to save these animals or that they're important.
Who's the person? You know what I mean? I think it depends on who's asking.
I would say someone who has an economic, interest in having a lower population of seals in their minds. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a lot of ways to handle that, but I think one is, I try to encourage people to take the long view, which I know it's really hard. We have short lives. And the planet's very old, and these beings are really old. Sharks are ancient, We've been coexisting forever. And if it's possible to do it that long, trust me, it's possible to continue to do that in the future. And I think sometimes at the point where we're still figuring out the biology and figuring out what's happening in the ocean, there's so much that's changing quite rapidly right now. It would be hard to have all the answers and to be reassuring of everybody, and I can't reassure the seals that life is going to continue to be amazing either, because, you know, I'm just an artist. But I think the diversity and the variety, the amazing ruggedness of New England, the way that it changes with the seasons, the way that life in the ocean changes and shifts depending on what time of year it is, what the currents are doing, you know, what prey species are gracing our shores that I'm out there fishing for as well as anyone else. That's all, it's a gift, you know, it enriches our lives. And so I think it's striking a balance, maybe. Thinking about economics, absolutely, we have to. But also thinking about other things, and maybe even considering alternatives in terms of, you know, tourism that's not impactful on the environment might be one way to kind of shift some things. I have a feeling, in fact, I know we're going to have to change some things simply because there's a lot that's happening, right? You know, I'm going to go on and on, so someone's going to have to stop me. But there was a beautiful lake that just reappeared in California, and of course there's hardship and there's displacement, and I don't mean to be dismissive of that, but it's an amazing gift, and it's recharging the water in that area, and life is coming back, and the birds are all there taking advantage of that wonderful gift. There's benefits to life that we can't see and aren't ever going to be easy to measure, but we can feel that, and I think that's valuable too. So I hope that helps.
Thank you. Yeah, I'd add to that, watch Ren's videos. And part of what I love about the exhibit is I'm, for those who don't know me, I'm like very scientific. I need the data, show me the facts. And to your point, not everything is seen all at once. It's an unfolding, it's how we all acquire, understand information, and you can watch about nutrients and the value of how seals may actually benefit commercially important fish species like cod. And using those snippets or information to relay stories, I think, is really impactful. As a scientist who had to learn to not talk about data, facts, and figures, it really became important to learn how to tell a story briefly, including how a seal might actually benefit the harvest of a species that you want rather than harm it. And the data supports it, but the storytelling isn't the data. The storytelling is being able to transfer that information, how the person you're speaking to wants it to be understood. So that's my 5-minute version of your 30-second want of an answer.
Yeah, and I'll add to that. I think that ecosystem idea and having people think about it's not just seals and humans and maybe one species of fish, but there's this whole ecosystem health that it interplays together. And so my entry point into this whole seal world, I'll say, was working with Dr. Jennifer Jackman here on a public attitudes towards seals study, which I worked with her on the pilot study on Nantucket, and now there's been a full one done on the Cape. But one of the really interesting takeaways from those studies are that the ecosystem health, really, everyone understands that. The fishermen understand it, the commercial fishermen, the anglers, tourists, voters, so that truth that seals are important in the ecosystem seems to resonate with a lot of people, which is really exciting.
I volunteer for the Cape Cod National Seashore as one of the SET team, seal education team members, and I'm on the beach a lot with people encountering seals. I volunteer with IFAW, and for the people who come up, what are we going to do about these seals? This is a big problem. Sometimes I feel like the best thing I can do is listen. You know, you might want to go check out Seals in Society. There's a lot of information there. What do you think? And just, I don't know, I think that battle of the opinions is so divisive and not fruitful. And sometimes for me, just, what do you see? What do you notice? And agreeing and opening that door to a conversation actually happening, even more than presenting information, is the best thing I can do.
Hi, I'm Amy, and I love what you just said about opening doors, and also in the video, you were talking about how you would love for people to leave with more questions than they walked in with. And I was thinking about that in reference to my job as a middle school science teacher and how I want to open up students to life science, but not just say, here's the biology and here's how the ecosystem works, and start things with stories and start things with questions that they can investigate on their own. So I wondered if I could capture your input on what sort of questions or conflicts might engage them, or might they be part of trying to solve, either through communication or through designing something engineering-wise or anything we can imagine. So that's my question.
Here's one idea. If you talk about entanglement with kids and you show them seals with serious entanglements and get them to think about, how are we going to fix this? How are we going to help this individual seal who's entangled right now, who maybe has a life-threatening neck wrap of monofilament? Or how are we going to make sure that doesn't happen in the first place? How does that happen? That ties you into everything, to the food web, to life history, to all of this stuff. But we don't have a solution. Let's talk together about maybe you have a great solution.
I was just thinking about an example that's become really important to me as a teaching tool, because I work with fishermen directly, like I fish, like actually go fishing. And it's always been so fascinating to still have the conflict or that misinformation, and asking the question of, well, what do you think they eat? And then getting responses, and they're usually, no offense, they're usually wrong. But having that come from anybody is great. Having that come from kids, having that come from your students, and then figuring out and asking them, well, how can we find out? How do we find out these answers? And it's something that I've done over and over and over to try and look at hard parts. Let's look at what's inside. Let's actually look at what's inside a seal stomach. You can do that. People here in this room can show you how. They're experts. But those are things that you can do together, either as models, not actually a seal stomach, they kind of stink, but you could create it or make it, and understand, to that point, to your point too, what's an ecosystem? How does this work? Why is this what they might be eating? Why do you think? Why did those thoughts occur to you that they were eating all the cod, for instance? Where did that come from? And then it becomes a question of biology, sociology. I mean, you can dive into Jennifer's studies too and learn about human dimensions, which was pivotal for me. But why people think the way they do is part of that assignment as well, which I think is really interesting. Anyways, so many ideas, but that's one, I think, concrete that you could maybe put into a science class that isn't just about the science.
And I can answer for the artsy kids in science class too, because I was a late bloomer in science, kind of struggled when I was younger, and then found that the arts were a way to access that. And so much of the conflict, I think, or not conflict, but one of the hardships sometimes for scientists is like, how do I share this amazing information I have with the public? So thinking how to take something really complex, and then how do you share that story, and that those kids that feel like they have more of a skill in writing or art or those things too, like that's become a really valuable skill. And thank you to this team for including me and making me feel like it's a valuable skill in advocating and sharing that knowledge as well.
And Amy, I'll throw in one other thing. At a previous NMEA conference, that's how Amy and I had met through National Marine Educators Association. I was at a workshop created by a teacher from Georgia, whose first name happened to be Georgia, and she did a simulated dolphin necropsy, thinking, you could adapt and do a simulated seal necropsy with some of the same methods, and I think I still have all those things here, and I can send those along. And we actually did that once during an April vacation week as a family activity. It was interesting. We use a bag of angel hair pasta to represent parasites in a seal's stomach, that kind of thing, Yeah. Anyway, there is another question here.
This is fabulous. I have a comment, a question, and then a crazy idea. I promise to keep it very quick. And I have asthma, so I know I cough a lot, so I apologize if I do that. First, I've only seen it for 15 minutes. The panels, they're fabulous. The interwoven, the right down to the bottom with bycatch and numbers and relating that back to history. You guys did a phenomenal, phenomenal job, and I wish we were videotaping this because I can't write. You are? Oh, fabulous. I'll pay for that. My question is, before the crazy idea, what are the thoughts for these panels? So I know that they're going out on exhibit, and that was discussed. So are you thinking it's going to schools or other nonprofits, or that the world's your seal as opposed to oyster?
I think this is one we can all answer because we all have ideas that are exciting. You want to go first?
Sure, I'll take it. I hope this is on. Hold on. I hope that's on. Yeah. So I'm also working on a seal exhibit with Rhode Island School of Design Museum, RISD, and they are actually eagerly awaiting the panels. And so probably as part of that exhibit, or perhaps even as a prequel, depending on the time, those panels will travel there as well. RISD is focusing on their northern collection, which has a lot of Inupiat traditional art and clothing and things like that. So I think it'll add a lot of richness and other dimensions to something that might be a little bit more focused on TEK as well as modern tribal fashion and things like that. So there's a lot of many connections, I think, that can be drawn. Seals have been such a part of human lives for so long. I can see them going to schools. I could see them going to other museums. There's so many beautiful maritime museums in just the Northeast alone, but I could see this traveling further for sure.
Yeah, I believe our next stop on the tour is the Cape Cod National Seashore, and then hopefully down to Mystic. So part of the thought was it could travel like the seals up and down the coast to different communities and people that may not have had that information, and it is in a form that is easy to transport, which is really good. And I know there's a couple places down the road that will take them, and then it's open to actually putting out a call of who wants them, because that's where it should go, is where the need is and where there's a desire to learn pretty much, yeah, up and down the coastline, maybe even down to Baltimore, perhaps, like all the way down. So there's opportunity there, and I think just to kind of give you a history or background, the idea in the beginning was to do it that way, to have an exhibit that would travel or to have it be in a place. And I think, yeah, I mentioned it, and I was like, oh, I have to mention this in the little video. Ren and I think in the beginning, we've tried to do this and to create it many different forms, many different times, and the response we got back for a bigger exhibit is, and this is like crushing, it's not a priority. This is a great idea, but who wants to hear about seals? So the hope is that this will open people's eyes to see how important it is, the stories that are there, the interest that it has for different people, and open people's eyes to think, wow, I really want to know more. Maybe this is a priority. Maybe this is something we need to share. I'm very fortunate and completely, utterly grateful to have friends in different spheres of science and life and art and culture. Sharks always get the attention. Fortunately, they're side by side, and they're a part of that story too. So making sure that all the pieces are integrated and communicated in a way that gets that set as a priority is something I hope to see, and that this might expand and be something greater. And I love that there's interest with other museums, because that's the way it grows and snowballs and becomes its bigger entity.
And we, so next stop, Province Lands Visitor Center out in Provincetown. We have plans with Wellfleet Audubon, which we're really excited about because so many school groups come through there.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the reasons we created the website along with the physical exhibit is that we knew, you know, time is fleeting, and if people have curiosity and can't travel to these spots, or, you know, time doesn't converge, the website is really an expansion of this foundational work, and so is accessible to anyone, anywhere, anytime, right now. And we'll also have a calendar of the exhibit as it travels, so people can know where it's going and where it's coming as that kind of develops.
Yeah, I was going to add quickly, I think the tribes might be interested in the Northeast and perhaps beyond as well, so that's a wonderful venue too.
for the crazy thought now. So I'm putting together interwoven story, fundamentals, leave people with questions, coexisting, take a deep breath. I need to have that tattooed to my arm. Yesterday I had the pleasure of being interviewed by multiple TV radio stations on the fly. I'm responsible for Duxbury Beach. It's a private reservation that owns the barrier beach. So I'm now stealing your idea of seals in society to plovers and people. But though the story isn't the same, I think that how you approached it is really spot on. It's not, the marine biology, and I'm with you. Don't give me a number unless I have something to compare it to, because it means nothing. But once you put in the story, you're bringing more people in, and you're in the side-by-sides that you did. Then I can start to someday understand the difference. I like to pretend I do, but I just think it's spot on, and I think that the way you approached it could be used for another. And you're right that Mark and everybody, they get all the glory for the sharks, but I think there's really something that can be used here as, if you will, I hate to say this, but a template or a protocol of how we can approach another issue that we have on the Cape. I live on the Cape, and I don't want to be having this plover people conversation, and I really like your suggestion of sometimes letting people speak. You did a phenomenal job. I'd love you all to come to Duxbury and then just talk, and I'll just tape record everything. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'll throw in too that perhaps fourth on the tour will be the Seacoast Science Center in Rye, New Hampshire. I learned in a conversation I had with the colleague there that they're a stranding site, and they were throwing Dre's name around pretty easily, so she's known to them. So so as it turns out, it's a perfectly logical place for this to go. I don't think we're going to have a shortage of places that will host this. I know that once we have our Navy Day here on March 16th of 2024, that it'll spend some time out at the base in Newport, so those folks can see it because they helped put this thing together. So it'll be great for that audience to see it, because sometimes it's hard to get people off of Aquidneck Island. I think I saw. Oh, sorry. There you go.
Yeah, I thought it was great to kind of go beyond the biology and start talking about cultural things. But I'm really interested, do seals have any specific cultural differences, like between colonies, the way they communicate, or behaviors, like, for instance, when you look at a sea otter, you think of how the sea otter floats on its back and opens an oyster with a rock in its paw. Are there cultural things that seals do that we don't know that are being studied or that could be incorporated into a seal exhibit?
I'm coming up with one right away, but I don't know if we want it in the exhibit. So it's cultural, and it's really interesting because I think coming from a scientific perspective, and for the folks on Nantucket, you might be able to respond to this, but there tends to be, for instance, in gray seals, I was just thinking about the corkscrew lesions that we see, that it could be that certain males, this is the thought, have a propensity to basically kill other seals, which is like completely different than most seals, but there's like a group of them, like rogue seals, and this has happened in Europe. So it's cultural in the sense that there's a few and they learn, and the same thing happens with an issue that we have closer to home, which is about provisioning or people feeding seals and seals learning where there's an easy meal. And this is one that behaviorally, understanding behavior of seals becomes critical, and leaning on our friends and colleagues who are also mentioned in our acknowledgements who study seal behavior is so important to understand the individual animal's response, that they are individuals, they have uniqueness to them, and that as a biologist or a population biologist or somebody studying numbers, you need to remember. And it goes down to thinking about welfare and individuals, and that each one is a unique critter or being, But that case, to me, is intriguing. And scientists are still trying to figure out why are these corkscrew lesions and why are some killing other seals. But it's fascinating. So that's when I was like, I don't know if we want to put that quite in the exhibit, but maybe on the website.
Here's a PG-friendly one. Gray seals in particular, the way seals communicate are so different. And Ren recorded some of the beautiful howling that we hear from gray seals. But recent underwater footage has shown that gray seals, the males in particular, they clap, literally, and they make this loud clapping sound underwater that's tied to, we're not totally sure, breeding, presence, territory, space, but so kind of similar to the pounding with a shell, they clap to communicate, which I love.
That's a better one.
That's bloody, that's for sure.
It's the pathologist in me. I'm like, there's this really weird thing.
I thought it was really interesting too, which I didn't know before. Dre is all my knowledge of seals comes from this brain right here. That gray seals and harbor seals have really different behaviors, like with their the pups and how long they spend with the pups. And so you might think like seals are all the same, but all the different species of seals have different behaviors and sort of culture, if you will, too.
I know that at the beginning of the presentation, it was mentioned that this took years and years, maybe a bit longer. So I'd just love to hear what helped you to hold on to hope while this process maybe wasn't the most linear and there maybe were some bumps in the road. What did you hold on to bring you to this moment now?
Thank you for that question, Rihanna. I'll start, I guess, because I'm sure we all have something different, but this team is amazing. I mean, I'd say every time there was this, oh my God, it's years later, we didn't get funding. How could we, starting in like year one, right? Just believing in what education can do and believing in teaching, believing in we have a generation ahead of us, generations ahead of us that we owe something to that are not here yet. I think that kept me going too. I want to see a world that has seals. I don't want to go back to the 1880s where we bounty hunted them for no reason other than our own exploitation of resources and misunderstanding. So that often came to the forefront, and I think in a lot of contentious discussions I've had with people, that's always come up of, well, I've got to do better. That's my responsibility. It's my mission, I guess, of what I need to do. But on those days that were really hard, where we were like, just what do we do? It's this team. This team is pretty amazing.
Yeah, I agree completely. It was like I always felt so rejuvenated when I got to talk to these amazing women. And yeah, like we started off before COVID, meeting in person sometimes, and everything moved to Zoom like the whole world did. But I always just felt so uplifted when I was meeting with them, and so appreciative of being a part of this team. And I think the other thing that happened is those questions would come up, little articles about the conflict or some of those misunderstandings. So time and time again, it would come up like, this is really needed. Like we need to do this because we want to get this information out there. And that kind of kept us going throughout. I think we figured it was 8 years, something like that. Yeah.
All that.
All right, so let's, almost time to be done because I'm thinking maybe people are ready for a snack and something to wet their whistles. I know it was mentioned a little bit here, but any final takeaway messages just in case it didn't end up in the final cut?
Thank you, Bob. That's a big one that should be in that final cut, who has persisted through this entire time and discussions I've had with him over many, many years, I guess now almost a decade, right, of trying to see this be a reality and how important it is, as you said, like why the Whaling Museum, why here? This is a really special place that tells the story of people and marine mammals, that there are the people to that story. And this is one of those places that people see it and can feel it, can live it. So thank you for having this be where it can make its appearance into the world and be born.
You're welcome. And I should throw out my the name of former colleague, coworker, Dr. Christina Canet Brophy, who I know was part of the very early conversations and helped bring in the David P. Wheatland Foundation, because you also need funding as encouragement too. Yeah.
Is Carrie Sparrow here?
She's not. Oh, Carrie did come in.
Oh, yay.
Yeah.
Carrie is the
Yeah.
amazing vision behind the design of these panels, and as a graphic designer, to pull these together and to take our rough ideas and photos and just make them so beautifully delicious visually. Thank
Yeah,
you.
she definitely deserves a round of applause for that. All while dealing with a very young child, too. Yeah. And it's perfect timing that my colleague Beatrice put up on the screen, you notice New Bedford Whaley Museum, Art, History, Science, Culture. Those 12 panels upstairs embody those 4 words right there, as created by those 4 and Carrie, and with the help of the Naval Undersea Warfare Center. Any final thoughts? Because otherwise, we're going to wrap this up. So I'm going to thank our panelists, my friends and partners here again, for their excellent work over many, many years, and tonight too, answering all your questions. Thank you all for being here. Gordon, you told me a really interesting story when you got here about a gift, a delivery you made today to Liz. Was that right? Lisa. Oh, to Lisa. How many pounds? 50 pounds of seal poop for research, taken out of a freezer somewhere out on the Cape. All right. And yes, we are going to end our presentation on seal poop. So thank you all for being here, and see you out in the lobby.